We begin today's show looking at youth social media addiction and a landmark case that's put big tech on trial. On Wednesday, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg testified in a Los Angeles courtroom and was grilled by defense attorneys about Instagram's practices. The trial stems from a lawsuit brought against Meta and Google by a 20-year-old from California named Kaylee, who says she became hooked on YouTube at the age of 6 and then by the age of 9 turned to Instagram. On one day, she spent 16 hours on the platform. She says the social media apps fueled her depression and suicidal thoughts. Kaylee's attorney told jurors, quote, "These companies built machines designed to addict the brains of children, and they did it on purpose." He likened the platforms to, quote, "digital casinos that profited off addictive behavior."
Last week, the head of Instagram described Kaylee's use of the platform as problematic, but he said the app was not clinically addictive. TikTok and Snap were previously named in the case, but the companies reached a settlement before the trial. Parents of children harmed by social media have gathered in Los Angeles for the trial. This is Juliana Arnold of the group Parents Rise. Her 17-year-old daughter died of fentanyl poisoning after receiving laced drugs from someone she met on Instagram.
Ironically, this court case is happening during her birthday next week. She would be 21 years old, and I'm going to be in this courtroom representing her and all the other kids that have been harmed and died due to social media platforms and their dangerous products and algorithms that they have created purposefully to addict these kids and keep them, get them hooked. They're children hooked so they can raise their engagement levels, which in turn, as you know, is for advertising, and that's their business model. And they're making billions and billions of dollars when kids are being harmed. They're putting profits over our kids' lives. And that's why this trial is so important, because it's the first time the public and legislators are going to get the truth.
And this is Todd Miner. His son Matthew died at the age of 12 while participating in a social media challenge known as the Choking or Blackout Challenge.
Matthew specifically passed from the choking challenge or the blackout challenge, and it was when I found him, I had to try to do CPR and everything because I'm retired military, so I tried doing CPR, but ultimately when we got to the hospital, he ended up passing away. But the detective was the one that told us about the blackout challenge on the social media apps, the dangerous algorithms, and he saw a dangerous rise in children passing because of these dangerous algorithms. We're a family brought together by tragedy and pain, and we are here to speak our truth, to say our children's lives matter. The other families that are in the courthouse, their families matter, and the kids that have yet to be harmed but have a potential to be harmed, their lives matter.
We're joined now by guests who have been tending the trial. Lori Schott's 18-year-old daughter, Annalee, died by suicide in 2020 from the body image issues Lori believes were exacerbated by social media. Lennon Torres is Senior Manager of Programs and Campaigns at the HEAT Initiative, which focuses on applying strategic pressure to big tech companies around the negligence of child sexual abuse online. She's also an LGBTQ+ advocate. And here in New York, we're joined by Laura Marquez-Garrett, an attorney at the Social Media Victims Law Center based in Seattle. Laura has filed more than 1,200 complaints against tech companies in state and federal courts across the country. They were just named to the Time 100 list of most influential people in health and are featured in the documentary Can't Look Away. Laura Marquez-Garrett, let's begin with you. You were just with our other guests in California at the trial, but you've flown into New York overnight. Thank you for joining us after the red eye, because you're being honored tonight by Time magazine. Can you start off by talking about the significance of this, what you've called a landmark trial?
Yes, so I mean, this trial is something that these parents have worked for years, trying to get accountability. You know, the significance here, it's not about a verdict. It's not about who's right. It's not about a win. It's about our system working the way it's supposed to. It's about transparency. It's about truth. And that's what we're seeing right now, right? We're seeing these documents come out. We're seeing testimony. Mark Zuckerberg testified yesterday. We're seeing these parents standing outside the courthouse telling their stories so that other parents know what's happening. And that's really the significance here. It's the American legal system doing what it's supposed to do, and frankly, what it should have done 10 years ago. There would be far fewer dead children if it had.
Well, Laurie Schott, you're one of the parents who's attending this trial to seek accountability for what happened with your daughter. If you could explain what exactly happened with Annalee when she went online and with the time that she spent on social media.
Yes. My beautiful daughter, Annalee, was 18 years old when she took her life. But from about her senior year in high school, or her sophomore year in high school and on, we could just see a change in her personality. You know, we always built our children up with confidence and clarity, and you could just see that what we thought was just a teenage girl growing up, the significant impact looking back now of how social media defined who she was. Not who she actually was in her heart, but what they told her she was.
And what are you hoping to see comes out of this trial, Laurie?
You know, I think justice comes in many forms. Nothing is going to bring my child back or any of these other children, but I want the world to know, and parents around the world to know, what the internal operations were targeting with these big tech corporations. It's really not big tech, it's predatory tech. You know, the predators always blame victims, and we were the victims of this. And I want the messages to be heard loud and clear and around the world that we've had enough. Hands off our kids. We are going to show the internal documents, I don't care if it's here or in Washington, D.C. or around the world, that shows the harms that they knew internally that they were doing. For me as a parent to sit in that courtroom and hear 18 out of 18 researchers, internal researchers for Meta, knew that body dysmorphia filters were harming children, and they did nothing, is unacceptable, and we need justice for that. We need change.
Laurie, what is your response to what Zuckerberg said yesterday in court? And how did that compare to when he testified before Congress?
It was two different things. You know, you sit there and you look at them trying to readjust their wording just because they walk through those courthouse doors. You can't take away what was on file and what we have documented that he said when we were in Congress that day. And to try and twist that around is just unacceptable. But I am thankful that he was put on that stand in front of that jury, the judge, and just basically having to be accountable for what he did. He knew, and I think he never thought that he would have to cross those courthouse steps. But yesterday was basically a justice day for our children.
And Lennon, Laurie just mentioned the concept of predatory tech. You yourself were subject to this when you started using social media at the age of 13. If you could describe your experience, and in particular, the attempted sexual extortion that you faced.
When I think about my time on social media, I think about all of the individual decisions that led to my lived experience on the platform. It mirrored a lot of what I saw in Annalee, and that is something I don't take lightly. I'm here by happenstance. I'm here on behalf of children who cannot be here. And my experience as a young trans person, as a young trans kid, was that my immediate environment was not providing me with the support I needed. And so I looked to digital communities, and big tech or predatory tech really took the meaning of digital community away from LGBTQ plus people, because when we turn to online experiences, we are 3 times more likely to experience unwanted or risky interactions online. That is the research. LGBTQ people are at a higher risk of these harms. And so when I went to Instagram, when I was on these platforms, especially as a public-facing child who was on reality TV shows such as Dance Moms, I had hundreds of thousands of followers with access to me and some of my most intimate moments. And what's hard to admit but is important is, for so long I thought my experience was something I should be ashamed of. I never told anyone that I was receiving hundreds of messages from grown adult men trying to groom me online, because they understood I was vulnerable. I never talked about the fact that I was able to bypass age gating, age assurance online, because I would join these, Omegle type platforms. I would be off-platformed from Instagram because there at the time was no FaceTime or video chat in messages, because they knew that I was vulnerable and was looking for connection, and they were pros at exploiting that. That is by design. The social media platforms could easily stop strangers from being able to contact kids. They'll say they do it, but they don't. And until we have third-party independent verification of their safety features, we're at a standstill.
So if you could talk about you got your first iPhone in 7th grade. If you could talk about what attracted you to Instagram, and when you talk about age gating, explain exactly what you mean when companies say, people under this age can't be on Instagram or whatever, but how you got around it.
Well, when I joined Instagram, they didn't ask me my age. And they fill their terms and conditions with a bunch of rules, but they're not enforcing them. And they're also expecting young children to be reading their terms and conditions. I can't remember the last adult I talked to that even read cover to cover the terms and conditions. And that is why the system is broken. We're expecting too much from the consumer, and these big businesses have a duty to protect their consumers and create products that do not cause harm at an exponential scale. For me, what brought me to these platforms was community and connection. I wanted to express myself. I wanted to be able to connect with friends from all over the world. And we as a generation were brainwashed into thinking that in order to have all of that good, all of that connection, all of that community, support, resources, we had to take all of the bad that comes with it. And when I look at big tech's leadership, I just see lazy. I see a lack of innovation. I see a lack of accountability, and I see a lack of motivation to create digital community that young people like Anna, like myself, deserved. And if they're not going to build the platforms that I know young people can thrive on and get community and get support, then they must move out of the way, because we have young innovators out there and other companies that are doing the work because they know that we can have all of the good without the bad.
And Lori, could you talk about the particular complicity of TikTok in what happened to your daughter, and the fact that both TikTok and Snapchat reached a settlement shortly before the trial was set to begin, and the terms of the settlement are unknown? I mean, TikTok is a platform that doesn't have as many regular users as Facebook, which is 3 billion in the case of Facebook, 2 billion and growing in the case of TikTok. What is your response to the fact that a settlement was reached?
Well, I think it's very telling. I think it's telling that TikTok and Snap did not want to be put on that world stage alongside with Meta. But I think it also has to focus on that was an individual plaintiff case, and looking at that from the legal context, there had to be some discussion on to come to a settlement term. But with my daughter, I did not even know she was on TikTok. She hid the app underneath a calculator icon, and sadly we found out after she died from a friend that she actually saw a live suicide on TikTok, which added to her spiral of mental health struggles.
We're going to break. I also want to comment that Lori Schott is wearing a big pin with a picture of her beautiful daughter, Anna. Lori Schott is with us, as well as Lennon Torres. They're in Los Angeles. They're attending the trial. Mark Zuckerberg just spoke yesterday in the trial. He testified. Laura Marquez Garrett was also there at the trial, but she's come here to New York to be celebrated as one of the Time 100 at a big event tonight. Coming up, we'll also be joined by Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen. Stay with us. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We're continuing to look at the landmark trial about the harms of youth social media addiction is taking place in Los Angeles. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg testified on Wednesday. Meta is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram.
We're also joined by Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen. In 2021, she turned over tens of thousands of pages of internal Facebook documents to U.S. regulators in the Wall Street Journal, which became the basis of a damning series of reports called the Facebook Papers. Her memoir is titled The Power of One, How I Found the Strength to Tell the Truth and Why I Blew the Whistle on Facebook. Frances, yesterday, yes, Meta CEO, billionaire Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg was grilled about Instagram's effect on the mental health of young users. What struck you most about what he had to say? What was true, and do you believe he told the truth?
I don't know if you've noticed over the last couple of years that he's shown up on a number of podcasts where he often gets tossed pretty softballs. What was remarkable about reading the coverage of Mark's testimony yesterday was how different it is when the person sitting across from him asking the questions gets to ask hard follow-up questions. You know, things like, you know, he's bragged before on other podcasts about not fearing ever being fired because of his stock ownership in the company. He owns the majority of voting shares. Or the majority of the votes. He could just put in a new board if they tried to fire him. You know, having to actually have a meaningful conversation about what is the implication of that level of extreme control. You know, he's never had to sit there and squirm while being asked questions like that.
And Frances, just tell us, you're a former Facebook whistleblower and advocate for social media transparency. What did you learn being within Facebook? What did the companies know about the addictive potential of their algorithms and content?
So within the child safety space, you could say there's kind of two major areas. One is the well-being of kids, and I would say that's where work on addiction falls. And then I would say child safety, like dealing with predators, dealing with people who distribute child abuse material. I worked within threat intelligence, which was the nitty-gritty, hands-on investigators going in there and hunting individual people who were running scams, running terrorist organizations. My team worked on counter-espionage. So the closest I saw firsthand to how Facebook underinvested in the safety of children was that the team that was responsible for finding people who were distributing child abuse material or looking for adults that preyed on children or finding there are these marketplaces where adults solicit nude photos of children from the children directly. That team was so strapped for resources that if you'd given them a single engineer more, they probably would have accomplished 10 times as much. Right? That's the attitude that I saw repeated at Facebook firsthand. The documents I brought out, though, painted an even broader picture. So while I saw things that made me uncomfortable when it came to kids, what the documents of Facebook showed was that Facebook viewed them very instrumentally. They cared about the role of teenagers in bringing in their younger siblings, bringing their parents onto the platform. They worried about public perception, not the actual health of the kids, but the perception that the products might be addictive. And what we know now that these documents have been brought for because of the court cases is that there were lots and lots of experiments being run to make these products safer. They knew that the kids said these changes, things like don't send me an alert in the middle of the night, made kids less stressed, let them sleep better. And yet they didn't launch them because it also made them use Instagram 1% less.
So what did these companies know, and when did they know it? I mean, you have Zuckerberg testifying. This is under oath. Last week, after Instagram CEO Adam Mosseri spoke on the witness stand, he pushed back on the science behind social media addiction by denying users could be clinically addicted. Can you talk about that? And the case that's at the heart of the trial, the 20-year-old woman known as KGM, who says her addiction to using YouTube and Instagram worsened her depression and suicidal thoughts.
So this is one of these little turns of phrase that I think is it's a wonderful illustration of how Meta, Facebook, Instagram have gotten very, very good at speaking in a very precise style where factually you can defend what they say. So addiction is a medical term. So if I get addicted to painkillers, if I get addicted to cigarettes, like going off of cigarettes because your nervous system has become dependent on nicotine, you go through very intense physiological symptoms. Where you go off painkillers, you're going to literally be vomiting, right? When kids stop using social media, if you isolate that child, you do see things that are indicative of their brain chemistry is changing. You know, they're used to tons and tons of dopamine. Now they don't have that stimulation. Like I think any parent who gives their kids a lot of screen time and then tries to have them sit still for dinner or like makes them go on family vacation and leave their phone behind sees that behavior change. But from a medical standpoint, that behavioral dependence is not considered medically to be addiction. But when you come in there and downplay what happens with compulsive use, which is the scientific term of art around these things, it really downplays how having a generation of children who get hooked at 7, 8, 9. Because remember, 30% of 7 to 9-year-olds were on social media as recently as 2022. Imagine what it is today. When you have kids whose brains are being just bathed in dopamine from scrolling all day at such a young age, it changes how their ability to sit still in class, to interact meaningfully face-to-face with their family or friends. And you see this from the growing number of reports from teachers who say, I've taught for 20 years and I don't understand what's going on. The kids who come into my 7th grade class have never behaved like this before. So that's kind of the consequences that we're living with of having, as the court documents show, they've been getting warned about this for 10 plus years. And yet they continue to optimize for spending more and more time on these platforms.
As we said, we're also still joined by Lori Schott, who lost her daughter Anna and is attending the trial, Lennon Torres as well, and Laura Marquez Garrett. Ramin?
So, Lori, let's go back to you. You said about your daughter, because it's not just concerns about what these children, young people are putting online, but also what they're receiving in response. You said about your daughter, I was so worried about what my child was putting out online. I didn't realize what she was receiving. So could you tell us what precisely she was receiving and how you came to see it?
Well, with Annalee, after she passed away, we were able to gain access into her platforms. And from what I saw at first, opening that as a parent who lost a child and trying to understand this world of social media, it brought me to my knees. This child was pushed content about anxiety and depression. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 screenshot images. It was pushed to her constantly. And it was just time and time again the same theme that pulled her down that rabbit hole. It hooked her into this world that just destroyed her mental health, that told her she wasn't good enough, that told her she was broken. My daughter was not broken. These platforms are broken. Mark Zuckerberg is broken. And we're here to fight for change on that, because no child should be exposed to what my daughter saw. And we tried tirelessly as parents to guide her, and she was a beautiful person, and they took that person away from us.
Laura Marquez Garrett, you were just with both Lori and with Lennon. You were attending the trial. You're here in New York. As you were getting ready for the show, I saw your tattoo on your forearm. Can you can you pull back your jacket and show us the significance of this tattoo?
Sure. So I have two, and these are my children's names, and each of the rays of sun is a child that's been lost to a social media and/or AI product. Right, and these are patterns.
How many?
296. That's not all of them. That's just the ones that we've either drafted and filed their complaints, or we've met their parents and come to love these kids.
And what does it mean when you file 1,200 complaints? Complaints to who? What happens?
There's unlimited. So we file them in state and federal courts. Look, we're filing them. This is one of many cases. We have the federal, the MDL, where you have the attorney generals, you have school districts. We have one-off state court cases in Delaware, in New York, we had Vermont, Connecticut. Essentially with these companies, I mean, these are the best resourced companies in the world. And so it is a fight, it is a battle, and we are trying to find those points where they need to be held accountable, where we can break through and where we can hold them accountable.
So Laura, you, as you mentioned, of course, you're an attorney for the Social Media Victims Law Center. If you could give us an example of what it would mean to place restrictions on social media use that would protect children. We just heard earlier in our introduction about a child who died while participating in a blackout or choking challenge. So just explain, what kinds of restrictions are we hoping for?
Sure, so these are design defects, right? So think of the Pinto. It's not a restriction as much as fixing it. And fixing a defective part, a part that is exploding. It's not, someone asked me the other day, well, Meta's saying they're fixing it, they're doing this, and my answer was that's kind of like sticking a fire extinguisher in a Ford Pinto and saying, there you go. We fixed it. It's still a defective part. And so ultimately fixing it, and they know this, it's in their documents that are becoming public, they could remove the addictive mechanisms. They could, it's as simple as, think of your television set at home. We have this remote control. We got to turn the volume down, up, change the channels. They've kept those controls on the back end, right? They could give you the option to slow down the algorithm.
Explain the algorithm. For people who aren't familiar with social media, what does it mean when Lori Schott said that her daughter, Annalie, kept being fed with the same thing, going down a rabbit hole?
Sure. So these are social media algorithms specifically because there are many types of algorithms, and these companies have programmed them for engagement first. So, we have instances where children, and we have the data, children will look for uplifting speeches, inspirational quotes, and they will get breakup and suicide. Right? You have, and we have this over and over. We literally have images we can provide where a child looked for this and got the opposite, not because they wanted it, but because TikTok determined this is what will keep this kid hooked. Now, if a child is going through a breakup, and this is Mason Eden specifically, he looks for, I believe, was inspirational quotes. If TikTok had shown him what he sought out, what would he have done? Well, potentially he would have put it down and he would have talked to someone. They don't want that, right? So they're programming for engagement above all else. That is a programming choice. It is frankly a form of profiling, right? They're taking thousands of data points that our children, we as consumers, we're not consenting to that. We're not saying yes. I mean, they can tell you the kind of car you drive, your education, all of these pieces that they can then use to profile and target. And in the case of vulnerable children, it's deadly.
So you mean that, literally in this case, a child is looking for inspiration
yes.
and instead gets, in fact, quite the opposite. I mean, the way that we're, as adults, familiar with the way that algorithms work is that, for example, on a news site, you look at the same news site, you keep getting fed the same news site. This is extraordinary that the child is receiving something that is exactly the opposite. And you're saying that's because it's more addictive?
Right. No, that's the defect. So you're thinking of like search engine algorithms, right? If I go into a typical search engine, it's programmed differently. It's designed differently. If I search for Chinese food restaurant, I will get, here are some Chinese food restaurants within a 5-mile radius. If I go onto Instagram, I may end up with a beheading video in China, right? Something that, and I'll use an LGBTQ instance because I had a young person say to me once, when I would look up gay pride on Instagram, I would get half gay pride and half Westboro Baptist Church, you're going to hell. That is what these algorithms are doing. They're not showing our children what our children are asking to see. They're programmed to show them what they think they cannot look away from, which are car accidents, extremes, outrage, all of these things, and that is what is causing harm.
Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, as we wrap up, you see at the Trump inauguration the billionaire brotherhood that includes Mark Zuckerberg. How does that influence the lack of regulation that we're seeing today?
Before I do that, I want to put one tiny little thing and to add a cherry on top of what Laura said. There's a lot of really basic things that you can do, even to make the current system safer. For example, they've asked users before and said, does this content make you feel bad? And if they saw people beginning to look at more and more and more content that people say, when I see this, it makes me feel bad. If they just gave people a choice and said, hey, we noticed you're looking at more and more depressing content. Do you want to keep doing this? You can do very simple things like this. But when we look at the oligarchs that run these tech companies, we've set a norm that we are supposed to just trust them, that they've given us these wonderful, quote, free gifts, even though the price of these gifts is ourselves, our kids, our data. We've been told, you've been given such great gifts, we know so much, just trust us. And that age of just trust us needs to end. We need real accountability, real transparency, so that people who build better things get rewarded for bringing us social media that actually is good for us.
Lennon, we just have 30 seconds. You're with the HEED initiative, which focuses on applying strategic pressure to big tech companies. But I want to ask you, as a young person, your advice to young people on social media now.
My advice is to demand better and to force Mark Zuckerberg and the other lazy, lack of innovative CEOs to step to the side and let true innovators show you what digital community and connection can actually look like.
Lennon Torres, Senior Manager of Programs and Campaigns at the HEED Initiative, Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, Lori Schott, her 18-year-old daughter Annalee died by suicide in 2020, and Laura Marquez Garrett, attorney at the Social Media Victims Law Center based in Seattle. Laura was just named to the Time 100 list of most influential people in health and are featured in the documentary Can't Look Away. Laura will be honored tonight by Time. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.